On that day, you really thought I would disappear. Just yesterday, you thought I was invulnerable. I, the grand old queen of cathedrals, daughter of human patience and genius, a beacon raised on the prow of Ile de la Cité, this ship launched across the stormy seas of the centuries. At a moment when my future is in your hands, 1,000 memories come rushing back. It was 800 years ago when my builders raised me out of the ground. During the legendary Middle Ages, when I was built to exceed all others. I am Notre-Dame de Paris, and this is my story. At first, I was no more than the improbable dream of one man. The dazzling vision of a modest woodcutter's son who rose to become Bishop of Paris. Maurice de Sully, who was mad enough to believe in his dreams. It is Paris in the year 1160. And his dream of a cathedral is too great for his time. The canons, those powerful administrators who manage the diocese with him, have refused to support his project. It is too costly, too uncertain. In a word, I was no more than a foolish idea. In the mid-12th century, the old Cathedral of Paris, narrow and dark, seems like it will be there for eternity. After all, it is in proportion to Paris, which was a far cry from the major capital you know today. The small kingdom of France was weak and divided at the time, and the modest diocese of Paris was not as prestigious as those of Rouen, Sens, Chartres, or Reims, which hosted the coronation of kings. Maurice de Sully should have accepted the obvious. My time had not yet come. But little did he care. I filled his days and haunted his nights, a faint silhouette on a wax tablet. To the devil with prudence and mediocrity. Against the advice of the canons, Sully summoned the most famous master builders, the ancestors of architects. The one overseeing the works at Saint-Germain-des-Prés.
Thank you.
Your Grace.
And the one from Sens Cathedral. Together, they passionately discussed the latest architectural innovations. Goodbye, old churches with thick walls and narrow windows. Thanks to the Gothic arch, horizontal thrust could be reduced, all while stretching up toward the sky, ever higher. They sang the praises of the ribbed vault, which distributes the vault's weight among the pillars, lightening the structure. Lateral thrust is absorbed by flying buttresses and their heavy pinnacles. These revolutionary ideas brought dreams of light within reach. But each time Maurice de Sully mentioned the dimensions of his cathedral, he always got the same answer.
It will never stand.
Am I to understand that you'll not accept this challenge either?
I regret so, Your Grace.
Maurice de Sully had never been so alone. Perhaps that is the lot of visionaries. Before being copied by everyone, they're taken for madmen. In the face of so much disappointment, how not to throw in the towel? People said he had withdrawn into silence in one of the Romanesque abbeys flourishing in the kingdom at the time, to atone among the monks for his builder's vanity. Beneath the modest vaults of this cradle, inspired by a gentle light, he would meditate on the humility befitting a good Christian. But Sully was elsewhere, and he was not meditating. He had simply given up on fighting for his cathedral, abandoning his bishop's outfit and returning to the forests of his childhood. Was it a sign from God? Or the forest of his childhood sending him a message?
You must charm in order to convince. I think this model will do the trick. What do you think, Etienne?
How many years will it take to build?
A lifetime. But we're not there yet.
My future now depended on a wooden model. It had to charm a single person, the King of France, Louis VII, who was preparing to spend the winter in Paris.
Paris will become the setting for your majesty. Regardless of where it comes from, the full glory of the city will reflect upon your crown.
Well then, make sure that my cathedral is the most beautiful, so that none other can rival its splendor.
The most beautiful of cathedrals. Finally, with the king's support, everything was possible. My giant construction site would shake up all of Île-de-France. But it is in the large forests of the Paris Basin that everything began, among the trees that the men of the Middle Ages grew like wheat. Wood is no less noble than stone, and it's through wood that the ingenuity of my builders first revealed itself. For in those times, nothing spectacular could be accomplished without wood. It was needed for scaffoldings, framework beams, and hoisting machines, for tool handles, and workshop roofs. And thousands of additional tons for the cathedral's immense work site to come alive. The depths of the earth tremble as the quarrymen drudge away with their sledgehammers. The master quarrymen have to extract thousands of limestone blocks, one after another. But one block must be brought to Paris without delay. The one that will serve as my first stone.
Secundum gratiam Dei, quae data est mihi und sapiens architectus fundamentum posi, alias autem supere deficat.
What a triumph! The blessing of this holy stone takes place before two of the most powerful men in Christianity, the King of France and Pope Alexander III. It is the year of our Lord 1163.
We put our church under the protection of the Virgin Mary, the Mother of Christ. It will be called Notre-Dame Cathedral. Notre-Dame de Paris.
In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Amen.
With the Pope's blessing, Sully's construction can finally begin. The Ile de la Cité will be forever changed. The old cathedral has had its day. Part of it is preserved for service that must be held somewhere until Notre-Dame de Paris rises above the city. Everything about my architecture is sacred. My choir, transept, and nave will form a stone ship 127 meters in length and shaped like a cross. My choir symbolizes the head of Christ. Like most churches, it is oriented, which is to say it faces the Orient to welcome the first rays of light, those that dispel the darkness and enter the souls of the faithful. What joy! The music of my construction finally echoes across all of Paris. It is the year 1164. As one would expect, Etienne could not resist the call of the worksite. He gave his professors the slip soon enough. The bishop tried to reason with him, but you'd never seen a more stubborn boy. Sully had entrusted the construction work to Richard.
Come on, they're waiting.
A simple stonemason who he'd made my master builder, because he knew that on a building site, it's hands-on knowledge that matters.
Keep it moving, pipsqueak! By the Lord, keep digging! We'll need to stack up a dozen like you.
The trenches will be filled with hundreds of tons of blocks and stones to create the foundations that will bear my full weight. They stretch 9 meters underground. This phase is both colossal and crucial, for nothing will stand on weak foundations.
The foundations for the choir will be finished by autumn.
Take the time you need. Our island soil is fragile.
We're going to load it with so many stones that it won't budge. It's the transit pillars where we'll have to be careful.
Oh, I see.
My founder's nightmares have given way to the builder's exultation. Sully thinks of nothing but the size of my pillars or the design of my flying buttresses. He almost forgets how perilous an adventure he embarked upon with such rudimentary means. 1172. 5 years have passed. 5 long years of labor before reaping the first rewards. My choir has begun to emerge from the ground. Don't think this is the construction site for the pyramids. My builders are not many, often just a few dozen. Their tools may be rudimentary, but their gestures are precise, and their know-how unrivaled. These men are part of a special world. There are no slaves here. Every bit of manpower is paid. A little village of workshops sprouts up at my feet. They house the masters and guild craftsmen from the 80 occupations needed for my construction. They are the elite of the worksite, and their talent costs dear. Etienne has also grown. Sully can be pleased, for the little vagabond has found a family. Actually, he's found something even better. A calling. he dreamed of being a stonecutter. He admired the highly skilled craftsmen belonging to the Companion Guild and envied the fortunate ones who completed a 6-year apprenticeship. That's the time it takes to distinguish the nuance of Parisian limestone, the muffled notes of soft stones, the bright sound of lié or cliquot, the hard stones that bear the extreme pressures exerted on my pillars. Each block must be perfectly square, for we are building for eternity. Etienne learned the name of each of their precious tools: mason's hammer, claw chisel, straight chisel, so costly to maintain that the master counted them every night. Through sheer perseverance, he managed to gain acceptance in this closed and secret world. In the end, the master entrusted him with a first block. Etienne had never been so happy. But he still had so much to learn.
It's not ready yet.
Paul's journey was all mapped out. He would succeed his father.
Scrape the sides as well.
For now, he was learning how to dose the quantity of lime, sand, and gravel that's needed to make mortar. To feel the resistance of this infinitely subtle mix beneath his trowel. To read its glistening reflections and determine the precise moment when this cement is ready for use. Considerable quantities are needed, for this mortar seals not just the blocks, but also my walls. It fills their interior, mixed with crudely cut stones. Mortar may seem less noble than stone, but it's what gives my walls their strength. When their apprenticeship is complete, stonecutters can carve their signature or mason's mark on their blocks in order to be paid for their work. Etienne was gifted. One day he would be a great craftsman. Every stone in a cathedral has its story. Each one secretly bears the memory of the hand that carved it. I am the stuff of their destinies, these builders who patiently raise my choir over 3 levels, supported by heavy abutment and rows of flying buttresses. But don't be naive. It took fortunes to produce these marvels. Sully could count on the revenues of the diocese, which was incredibly wealthy. The fertile lands of the Paris basin provided the means to pay for the colossal expenses of construction. But in the Middle Ages, vagaries of weather could quickly turn into calamity. All it took was a rainy summer, followed by a freezing winter, for the ground to turn to stone and the diocese's income to suddenly collapse. Building a cathedral was a luxury that could no longer be afforded. The canons of the Fabrique, who had the weighty task of administering the site's finances, had warned the bishop. Soon there won't be a penny left.
Put it to good use.
Lord, forgive me my sins. Give me the strength to carry on.
But Sully didn't want to hear any of it. God was simply testing their courage. He would find the money, using every means at his disposal. He brought out the precious relics of Christian saints from their chests. The remains of Saint Denis, the first bishop of Paris, and even a vase said to have held the real milk of the Virgin Mary. The people of the Middle Ages venerated relics, and their presentation ceremonies provided fine opportunities to take the collection.
Come forward.
But this was not enough, and Sully forgot his principles.
Thank you, Father.
He ordered the sale of candles to be revived. In exchange for a heavy sack of flour or a few coins, the church would pardon certain sins. Not fasting during Lent, or a shameful relation. My founder was ready to pardon anything in order for work to resume. The gifts of the faithful have allowed construction to resume. But the threats of the formidable cannon have shaken my builders. What if they're chasing after sinful glory without knowing it? What if Maurice de Sully's project, to which they have devoted their lives, is destined for disaster? It was urgent that my choir be finished, so that service could finally be held there. The builders shape and raise the 1,000 beams of my framework, some of which were hewn out of centuries-old oaks. They give it its magnificent name, the Forest. Then, the building must quickly be protected from inclement weather with a roof of large lead sheets.
Come up here. I need some help.
Over here. Give it to me.
The roofers are among the elite on my construction site. Only the most seasoned are allowed to climb my peaks, 45 meters above the ground. (1182), 20 years after the start of construction, my choir finally echoes with the sounds of the cannon's prayers. It has been closed off by a temporary wall. But for my builders, the possibility of one day seeing the completed cathedral has vanished forever.
I have bad news.
The new king,
You're great.
Philip Auguste, often sought out the bishop for counsel. What influence did Sully have? No one will know. But it was at this moment that the king decided to make Paris his capital. He equipped the city with a surrounding wall measuring 5 kilometers, flanked by 77 towers, and started construction on the Château du Louvre, the formidable fortress west of the ramparts. Amid this surge of activity, my builders redouble their efforts. The most prodigious phase takes place beneath my framework, the laying of my vaults. Richard had wood centerings installed atop the pillars, on which the masons laid the stone blocks one by one. The keystone is the centerpiece, ensuring the cohesion of the whole. Then comes the blocks that enclose the vault. But the procedure is always delicate, always uncertain, especially for the largest one, the transept crossing. Etienne chiseled each vault stone so they would fit perfectly against one another. All that's left is for Paul's mortar to set like glue. As though their talent and devotion are not enough, they also add their anxious prayers.
it's safe. Keep it coming.
Installing the arches had gone as well as possible. The mortar had set. This 18-meter stone bridge hangs 39 meters above the ground. The hour of truth has come.
Come on, what are you waiting for?
Let's proceed all together. On my mark!
Nothing is too big or too beautiful for the Lord. His house should be high like the vault of the sky.
Now!
It held.
We did it.
It held. It held up. Hurry up and come down! This calls for a celebration!
We're coming!
Watch out! It's coming down! No! No!
The construction will continue. But the time has come for you to leave, Etienne.
But why? The centerings weren't heavily damaged. A few more days and we can lay the vault again.
Richard is dead. Paul is going to continue. He's his son. That's how things work.
I have to stay. I must.
You're gifted, Etienne. But you still have much to learn. Take this. You will go from site to site. It's the only way to improve your art. I have faith in your good fortune. Yes.
In the Middle Ages, goodbye often means farewell. With Etienne gone, Sully's health begins to fail. What will become of me without the inspiration from which I was born? Sensing that his strength was leaving him, the old man withdrew into his Paris abbey. He passed away in 1196, over 80 years old. I am orphaned. My founder will never see his life's work completed, but he did something even greater. He launched a little vagabond on the path of great builders. When his tears had dried, Etienne resumed his odyssey, drawing the century's marvelous inventions in his notebook. He offered his talents from site to site and perfected his art. His curiosity was insatiable. He had to understand everything. Everywhere he sought to detect the secret laws that govern architecture and the nature of things. In Paris, the music of the stonecutters' workshops has resumed. Additional craftsmen have come to lend a hand. The work will continue, come what may. My choir is extended by a spectacular nave. Before dying, Sully left enough to pay for its lead roofing. Under Paul's orders, my imposing facade begins to surge from the ground, with its 3 monumental portals. It is now the year 1215. The stonecutters have been joined by sculptors who bear a wonderful name: Imagiers, the image makers. Beneath their chisels, the scenes from Holy Scripture commissioned by the canons transform into images of infinite grace. In this world where books are so rare, they are the pages of a stone Bible. The blissful poses of those chosen for paradise aren't what inspire the sculptors the most. It's the visions of hell, with their terrifying creatures and tortured bodies, that bring forth the full genius of the imagier. Also the torments of these Middle Ages, haunted by fear of divine punishment. In the spring of 1219, torrential rains fall on Paris. The Seine has once again risen from its bed, and this time, it has taken everything along with it. Paul was devastated. He realized how fragile I was. The most spectacular damage is often not the most serious. Water is an insidious enemy. With each downpour, it weighs against my sides, runs along the walls, and digs into my facades, infiltrating the stone and breaking it in times of frost. I am not yet 50 years old, and water is already nibbling away at me like leprosy. My misfortunes reach the ears of the man who is now known as Master Etienne. It is the year 1220, and I am in need of him. But when he steps inside Philippe Auguste's wall, his heart twinges. How not to dread our reunion? My foundations were so weakened by the water that work had to be stopped. He knows all this, but hasn't seen me yet. I'm such a sorry sight.
Etienne, you're finally here.
To work, by God. Pull.
Etienne's return has delighted the canons, for they want to build a monumental gallery above the portals to hold the statues of 28 kings in honor of Philippe Auguste.
We need it as soon as possible. Does this seem feasible to you?
Mm-hmm.
The 2 fighting boys who I watched grow up have combined their forces for a final challenge. Under Etienne's orders, the best imagiers sculpted enormous blocks of limestone. Each king required a month of work. Under Paul's orders, The gallery was quickly built. The laws of perspective would be established 2 centuries later, but Etienne has already mastered its codes. He asks the sculptors to give the statues bodies that are longer than natural, with bigger heads. Seen from the ground 15 meters below, the kings will assume their correct proportions. After dark, Etienne leads another battle against the devastating effect of rain. To drain away the thousands of liters of water that fall on my roofs with each downpour, he imagines digging the tops of the flying buttresses to transform them into gutters, connected to a vast network of channels. The gargoyles at their far ends will spit out water at a distance in order to preserve the walls. This amazing invention will save my life. He'd come a long way since his improbable encounter with Maurice de Sully. My gown of stone was not always white. The facades of my builders were radiant with color. These are the true Middle Ages, which some thought dark and ignorant, building cathedrals of unrivaled beauty in the heart of cities. The builders of Etienne's generation were tired now. They had to learn everything by themselves, invent everything on their own. They had devoted their lives to me.
Hey!
Adieu, Etienne. Farewell. And thanks to you, the craftsman of my youth. But other builders had already taken over the reins. They launched gigantic works. To build the drainage network imagined by Etienne, my roof had to be removed, and my walls raised by 2 meters. They used the opportunity to transform the small terrace roofs and to rework the flying buttresses. My framework is entirely remounted, 1,200 tons of wood and lead, which they crown with a spire. Seeking to improve Sully's project, they transform my small windows into walls of glass that other cathedrals will rush to imitate. And of course, they finally raise my 2 towers, 69 meters above the ground, much higher than the one in the king's palace. In the late 1230s, I finally have the outline you know so well. The one that Maurice de Sully drew 80 years earlier on a wax tablet. But my story is far from over. It was all set. August 18th, 1239 should have been my day of glory. The reign of Philippe Auguste saw my construction. That of his grandson, St. Louis, would see my consecration. On that day, the very Christian of kings brought the most coveted of all relics back to Paris, the crown of thorns that Christ wore during the crucifixion.
Here it comes.
It had cost an astronomical sum, enough to build 2 cathedrals. And it's to me, Notre-Dame de Paris that the king came with this invaluable treasure. All 100,000 Parisians held their breath. With this crown in Notre-Dame, Paris would be paradise. After staying in the shadows of other cathedrals for so long, I finally saw myself as the First Lady of France. I couldn't fathom that this crown wasn't meant for me. The king has the Sainte-Chapelle built in just 6 years, just a few streets from my towers. That sublime reliquary with its walls of glass is a miracle. The king has made up his mind. That would be the home of the Holy Crown. But there is worse yet. Aside from its insolent beauty, all that was marvelous 20 years ago now seemed heavy and dark. What remained of Maurice de Sully's daring, or Richard's sacrifice, Etienne's genius? Would construction have to resume once again? My builders would try to rise to this challenge, for my incredible story had just begun.